Welcome to Intentional Divorce Insights. I'm Leah Hadley, certified divorce financial analyst, accredited financial counselor, and the founder of Intentional Divorce Solutions. I'll be your guide through the complexities of divorce, finance, and emotional wellness. Join me as we uncover practical tips and empowering insights to help you navigate your divorce with clarity and intention. Hi there, and welcome back to Intentional Divorce Insights. I am so happy you're here. I have a wonderful guest today who's really going to give some great insight into dealing with divorce and real estate, which I know can be complicated and emotional, and has all the financial issues for a lot of you. So I am thrilled to introduce Bridget Potterton. She is a top real estate broker in San Diego and specializes in actually certified divorce real estate expert. So she has that specialty designation. She assists the family law community when there's real property that needs to be sold during the divorce process. She is only one of 250 CDREs around the entire country. So there's not very many people who really specialize in this divorce area. So the special training and protocols can really help her to help you effectively manage through the challenging process of selling during a divorce. Welcome, Bridget. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Leah, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, I know that our listeners probably have tons of questions as it relates to real estate, but I'm curious from your perspective, what are some of the biggest mistakes that divorcing couples make when they're handling their real estate decisions?
I think one of the challenges is that selling your home in a divorce is very different from selling your home under traditional circumstances. And I think that it's important to understand the process is going to be different. How you handle things are going to be different. See, in traditional real estate, I typically meet with maybe a husband and wife or brother and sister, whoever owns the property together. We make the decisions together and we move forward. But in a divorce transaction, I am representing two parties who are on the same side of the transaction, but who oppose one another. And it is a very different process. I think that oftentimes there are things that can be very frustrating with it, but I try to work with the attorneys and the mediators in advance in order to set everyone up for success and then set the expectations. One challenge that we have in this space is, let's say that one of the couple is living in the home and one is outside the home. So we call them the in-spouse and the out-spouse. The in-spouse oftentimes will feel so frustrated. I'm doing everything. They're not doing anything. I have to prep the house. I have to make the beds for the kids every day. And I've got to, clean the dishes. Everything has to look perfect. And they're not doing anything. Right. And so a lot of times the person living in the home just gets really frustrated. And then on the flip side, you have the person who doesn't live in the home, and they are so frustrated when they see the photos or find out that the condition that they're not cleaning up after themselves before the showings, and they're not making the kids' beds. And they feel hopeless, right? I'm going to lose money on the sale of this house, or it's going to take longer because it doesn't look that great. And these are challenges that typically, in traditional real estate, we don't really deal with. There's a lot of complexities in selling your home in divorce. And another common one is when you have one party who's on title. So let's say maybe the couple bought the home together, but for whatever reason, one of them was not on the mortgage or the title. Maybe they had bad credit or something like that. Or maybe one bought it in advance before they were married. And for that reason, in the family law world, they want me to come in and represent both parties. But technically, my client is the titled person, whoever is on title. And so working with the family law community in figuring out how we can involve the parties, even though they're not all on title, while still maintaining my fiduciary duty to the titled spouse. It's definitely a little more complicated than traditional real estate, but these are important things, and they're things that I deal with every day. Other things that, if we have a more a higher conflict type of case, it's not uncommon for me to deal with restraining orders and things that, again, in traditional real estate, we just don't think about is if you have a restraining order against one party and it's the one that's not living in the house, they can't go to the house. So, what happens when they were kicked out of the house and they have personal property in the home? I need to deliver that property free and clear of anything at close of escrow. So, how do I get them in the house when there's a restraining order and they can't be around the other person? So, a lot of these challenges come up in these types of cases, and certainly having somebody with like a certified divorce real estate expert like myself can really help you navigate through those challenges when you're working with your attorney or your mediator on how to proceed.
So many great points that you just made there. And even just the fact that you're so open to working with the family law attorney or working with the mediator to help them navigate through this process is just so beneficial. I'm curious what got you into this work, Bridget.
Well, about 17 years ago, I was pretty green. I was only a couple years into the industry, and an adorable couple had hired me to help them buy their first home. They were newlyweds, and they were super excited, and they wanted to go and take a look at this property. So I called the agent, find out information, and the agent, who was a very seasoned, very well respected agent in my area, I called and said, my clients are interested in taking a look at it. And she said, you know what, Bridget, just so you know, it's a nasty divorce. And husband cheated on wife. They were married for like 30 years. She found out. She threw all of his clothes out the door for all the neighbors to see. And she's giving me all the sordid details. And at the time, I kind of appreciated it because I thought, well, I guess this is what you do when you have a divorce listing. Um, and it was an awful experience for my clients, for myself, for the sellers, for their agent. No doubt there were so many delays. um, they were playing games with each other, and we kind of got caught in the middle, and we did finally close escrow, but not before my sweet newlyweds threatened to also get divorced if I didn't get them that house soon.
Oh,
and,
gosh.
and I remember thinking, I am never going to do another divorce transaction for the rest of my career. Clearly, the joke's on me, but because now I travel and I speak to agents all over the country on how to work in these complex transactions. But I think what I realized looking back is while that agent made a lot of mistakes, she never should have disclosed any of that. Disclosing that, in my opinion, is actually violating our clients' fair housing rights because familial status and marital status are protected classes in our country's fair housing laws. And so I think she was just doing the best she could. Back then, there wasn't a lot of great education, and honestly, there still isn't. That's one of the reasons why I started teaching my demystified class to realtors, because I realized that we were, as an industry, we're not handling these cases with the I guess white glove service that they deserve. I think as not only as an industry, but I think as a society, we tend to think, oh, a divorce listing is a distress sale, and they're not. I have some right now, I have some divorce listings and I have some traditional listings. And if you look at them online, you should not be able to tell the difference of which ones are which. And my team is trained. We don't disclose what listings of ours are just divorce or which ones are traditional, and it protects our clients because they deserve the very best. And I would say that my clients who are going through a divorce, they probably need that equity more than almost any other type of client out there because everything is being split in some way. And, I'm here in San Diego. It's very expensive to live here. And we tend to joke that we're house rich and cash poor. And for a lot of my clients, and I know you with what you do, you work with the clients throughout this process as well. But I always worry about my clients. When I sell their house, am I going to be able to get them enough money to where they can eventually buy again? Maybe not right this moment, but I want to set them up for success where they can, because it is very expensive to live here in California, and you know, having equity and owning a property is a game changer for most people.
That's such a good point. And honestly, I do a fair amount of work on California cases, and a lot of times the equity in the home in California is the biggest marital asset. And really making sure that you're working with somebody like you to maximize the equity that you get out of the house, it's going to be make such a huge difference for the parties going forward, and kind of starting that new chapter. One of the things you and I were talking about, Bridget, before we got started, was I see a lot of people trying to figure out what they want to do with this house, because especially people still have these phenomenal interest rates, like 3% interest on their mortgage, and they don't want to lose that interest rate. And they're always looking for creative solutions in terms of, how can we continue to maintain this house even though we're getting divorced? And a lot of times people decide to co-own the house. And I know you were talking about, there's some real downside to doing that. I wonder if you would share that with our audience.
Absolutely. So co-owning a house is very understandable. I'm a mom, and God forbid, I hope I never go through a divorce. But if I did, I wouldn't want to give up my house. I get it. Nobody wants to, right? You have that emotional attachment. But when you're trying to untangle your financials from the other person, it can be pretty risky to keep the house. Now, if one of you is on title and the other one is not, then that might be okay. But what if one of you is on title, but you're both on the mortgage? Then you're both technically financially responsible for the house, even if you're not on the title. So I think it's important to understand the differences. On the mortgage, let's say that the person who's staying in the home agrees, okay, let's keep the house till the kids turn 18, right? That's a really common one, till the kids move out. But what if you're both on the mortgage? And what if one of them stops paying the mortgage and you don't know about it? And yeah, there's certain things you can do to sort of protect yourself from that to a certain extent, but it's still a problem. The other thing is liability. Let's say that you're the outspouse now and you're still on the title. You agree to stay on title till the kids are 18 and then you're going to sell. And let's say you have a pool and somebody comes over and trips and falls into the pool and drowns, and now you're getting sued. You haven't been to the house in 3 years, and yet you're the owner. You're just as responsible as the person living in the home because you're on title. And so while these scenarios may seem extreme, this kind of stuff does happen.
Sure.
What if it's an investment property and you think, oh, well, neither of us even are tied to the property, but we've got that low rate and we're making money every month? Well, what if the same thing happens there? What if you get sued from something that happens with a tenant? You're both responsible. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with being a homeowner. The other scenario would be financial. Let's say, on the flip side, let's say that one of you takes out an equity line of credit on the house. Now, there are, again, certain barriers in place, but it's not a catch-all. So I would say that in general, from a liability standpoint, it's not a great idea to co-own the property with your spouse for an extended period of time. If there's a way for one of you to do a buyout, and I know, Leah, you and I were talking about you maybe having a certified divorce lending professional come on and chat about it. They can tell you a lot more about it than I can, but what the options are for a buyout or to assume the loan. Most loans are not assumable, and it's not like you just hand over the loan and it's an assumption. It's a lot more complicated than that. But sometimes under certain scenarios, you can do a loan assumption and they get to keep their rate. But that is more the exception than the rule, I would say.
Yeah. I'm wondering how somebody like yourself can help navigate situations where one of the spouses just isn't cooperating in the selling process. Like, is there something that you're able to do or help with?
So, most of uh, my listings are assigned either from an attorney or a mediator, and they will um, typically give me a heads up if one person is not on board. I have had some where one party wants to attempt to do a buyout. And so I tell them, don't waste your time with me right now. Go try to do a buyout with a lender. And then if it doesn't work out, then you can come back to me. So typically, I try to encourage them to exhaust all other options before doing this. Now, here's what I have discovered in years of doing this. Oftentimes, the delays happen because of something else, some other extenuating circumstances. For example, if they're still in court fighting over maybe child custody or another property, rarely is the reason that they say they're delaying the sale of the house actually having to do with the sale of the house. It
Mm.
usually has to do with some other piece that they can't control. And so they feel like they can control this piece. And oftentimes for me, it's just involving the attorneys and the mediator when I need to ensure that we continue to move forward. That does happen. I did have a listing that was referred to me. This was a couple years ago from an attorney, and she didn't want to sell. She did not want to sell. She was very nice. We met, we kind of talked through the whole process. And her attorney said, you know, Bridget, she decided not to use you, which is surprising. Normally, when there's a certified divorce real estate expert like me involved, I typically get the listing. And I asked her, why do you think that is? And she said, well, I know why. It's because my client wants to delay the process and you have too good of a system. And she doesn't think she can get away with it with you. I love honesty, right?
Right. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, what are you seeing, Bridget, right now in the current real estate market, and how is that impacting divorcing couples?
So I would say the biggest change in the last couple of years has been the interest rates going up. And one of the challenges with the interest rates going up means that a lot of times people that are going through a divorce and were planning on doing a buyout can no longer afford to do a buyout because, like you said, they have a 3% interest rate. One of them has to go out and try to qualify for a 7% interest rate or maybe 6.75. But even still, it's not even that simple. If you have a lot of equity and let's just say they're splitting it evenly. So we'll say the house is worth $1 million and they have a loan for 500,000. Now the here in California, like I said, remember we're cash poor and house rich. So oftentimes they'll refinance the house and pay the difference off to the person that they're buying out. And so that means you have to go from a $500,000 loan to probably around $750,000 loan to pay the other person out. And you just went from a 3% to a 7%. So your payment likely doubled. And now you're down to one income, right? Because you're getting divorced. So that's the biggest challenge I would say is it's unfortunate, but I've had several cases assigned to me in the last couple of years that I know they would have preferred to do a buyout, and because the rates were so high, they just couldn't swing it, and that's heartbreaking. I don't take any joy in that, and unfortunately, I don't see the rates coming down significantly anytime soon. And so I think that's going to continue to be a problem. There are some banks that will allow you to do assumable loans or certain types of loans, like a VA loan, which is typically used for our active duty military and veterans that are often assumable. But there's a lot of little, like I said, a lot of little caveats with it. So it's not just a simple transfer over. There's a lot that has to be agreed to and a lot that has to be done in order to qualify for those. And they can usually take a little while to do an assumable loan. The banks in general, are not that motivated to try to help a divorcing couple keep that loan because the bank doesn't want you to keep that loan. They want you to move up to a 7% loan, right? What's the
Very
motivation?
true.
So I would say that is a big problem right now. And then on the flip side, in general, for most parts of the country, with the exception of maybe Austin and a couple other cities, we're still in a seller's market. The market's not as hot as it was before, but still very much a seller's market, which is helpful for my clients selling. We're not seeing a lot of short sales, a lot of distress sales. I have had a couple, but for the most part, in the last couple of years, we really haven't seen many. So, despite the fact that you may be devastated that you have to sell your house, it's a pretty good time to sell, especially if you bought before 2020. You probably saw a massive amount of appreciation in your house.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And then, of course, I hear the other side is, yes, we can sell, but then we can't turn around and buy because of it being a seller's market and, all of the challenges that come along with that. It's a tough topic to deal with when it comes to divorce, when people are splitting up the real estate and deciding whether or not to keep the home or to not keep the home, and what that next chapter is going to look like, right? Because you already have everything in your life changing from, your day-to-day experiences, your financial life, everything is changing. And a lot of people just really want to hold on to the stability of staying in place in the home that they know. So it's a tough issue.
That's a really good point. And this might be a very unpopular opinion, being me being a realtor, but I often encourage my clients not to buy a house right away anyway.
Yeah.
And that might seem odd because obviously I believe in the power of home ownership. However, you are dealing with so much. You have so many decisions to make about your divorce, and divorce probably is taking a lot. Your divorce is probably taking a lot longer than you ever imagined, and you're overwhelmed and you're emotional. And I worry that sometimes people don't make great decisions when they're feeling like they're pushed up against a wall. And so I often encourage them, are you in a position where you can go stay with family for 6 months, or go rent something inexpensive for a couple months? Just get your head together. Don't go run out and buy something unless you can afford to buy something very similar to what you just are selling, which unfortunately in most cases that's not the case. But it just seems like if they're going to be buying something, hopefully it's going to be long term, and maybe if they take 6 months to a year to kind of get their bearings straight, they'll be in a better position to be able to buy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, Bridget, that a lot of times making that big financial decision when all of these changes are going on, people don't necessarily make great decisions. And where I see people losing money on real estate is when they buy and then sell much sooner than they had initially thought that they would, right? Because then you have all of the costs associated with, the real estate transaction and the loan and all of that. Whereas if you're going to stay in a property for a period of time, then we see people really growing their net worth through real estate. And so being in a position to know, I feel confident that this is a home that I'm going to stay in, is so important in making that decision.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's all emotional, right? There's so many emotions, and sometimes you just find yourself maybe making a bad decision. And I would hate for my clients to buy something and regret it later.
Yeah. Yeah. So this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me, Bridget. Where can people find out more about you? And then I'm also wondering if there's a place they can find out more about the CDRE and maybe somebody local in their area.
Absolutely. So you can find me on my website, comehometo.sandiego.com. And you're welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions. You can always reach out to me too if you are going through a divorce and you need a CDRE in your area. You can also go to the Alumni Institute and Google that, and there's a directory of CDREs around the country, and you can find somebody in your area. It is an incredible space. It's certainly an honor to help people who are going through a very vulnerable time. And CDREs were specially trained as third-party neutrals. We also are trained to be expert witnesses. So sometimes I have to go to court and testify for various reasons with regard to the sale of the home. It is a very unique space. It is, like I said, it brings me a lot of I don't want to say joy in that sense, but in working with couples that are not getting along, but there is a lot of gratitude that I have in being able to help people navigate this very, very difficult transition.
Well, and I can tell by the way you talk about it that, it must be very personally rewarding. And it is such an important time to have somebody with your expertise to really help on the team. And always remind people that, divorce really is a team sport, that really having the right people in your corner can make that transition so much easier. And so keep that in mind. Having a CDRE might be somebody that you want to add to your team. Thank you again, Bridget, for being on with us today. And I will see you all next week. Thank you for joining me on Intentional Divorce Insights. It's a privilege to share this time with you. I hope each episode offers valuable guidance to navigate your journey. If you find our content helpful, please leave a review to help others discover the benefits of intentional decision-making in divorce. Until next time, take care and continue to embrace your path with intention.